I knew what I was going to say this morning, and then I talked to Craig and Linda, and I really not sure what to say now. I think it's been said. But as I was watching the sun rise over LaGrange Road this morning, I'm sure when you walk in here on a Sunday morning, each one of you has something different on your mind. Maybe you're thinking about something in your own life, or you're thinking about something you saw on the news, and I just can't get out of my head that young man who was a prisoner in North Korea. I just can't stop thinking about that. And the image of him being carried out of the airplane. And then his dad addressing the media and talking about his imprisonment and his death here. It just gives me the chills just thinking about it. And then you see the pictures of the North Korean leader, and you see the military straight lines, and you see the kicking, and you can see the look in the eyes, and you just see the anger and the hatred, and you wonder, what's it all about? And I realize there's nothing I can do about it, probably nothing you can do about it, but I sometimes, where is God in all this? What does God think? Because, we talk about all of us being God's children. We talk about everybody being born into this world innocent. We have no choice where we're born, who we're born to, and then somehow along the way we have these incredible divisions that just kind of define who we are as a world. I contrasted that to the scene on Tuesday at Abraham Lincoln National Cemetery, where we laid our friend Calvin Singletary to rest on Tuesday morning. Calvin was a combat Marine veteran, served our country, was injured in the war. He came home, like all the other young men at that time, to a very, very ungrateful nation, where people coming home from Vietnam walked through airports and people spit at them and hurled all kinds of insults. But on Tuesday, with his casket draped in a flag, and with this incredibly dignified honor guard putting him to rest, and all those rows and rows of the tombstones lining the grounds at Abraham Lincoln, there was an aura of peace and gratitude and goodness. And when the fellow Marine knelt at Calvin's wife and presented her with the flag and said, "On behalf of a grateful nation," what a contrast to what I saw on the news when that young man came home, and then he had flashes of what it's like in North Korea. And I thought to myself, I just hate conflict. Hate it. I don't like the conflict with North Korea. I don't like conflicts in my family. I don't like conflicts between people in our nation. I don't like conflicts when even inside of ourselves we sometimes are conflicted and we're not sure who we are. And there are times when religion doesn't help. If you noticed, and I don't expect you to agree with me, God forbid, but you noticed I did not read part of the gospel this morning. You see, the whole Bible, and especially the Gospels, they're written long after things happened because they didn't write stuff down back then. They told stories. After Jesus died, the way the stories were preserved was not by writing things down, but by people just kind of sitting in places and communities talking about the stories, and the stories kind of matched what was going on in their lives. Now, this is what we've talked about for years. Jesus' words, "Love one another as I have loved you. My peace I bring to you. My peace I give to you." Jesus says, if somebody has a grievance against you, before you take the Lord's Supper, go to that person. Ask for forgiveness, make peace, and then come to the altar. Turn the other cheek. When I was persecuted and in jail, you came to visit me. That's Jesus. And then there's these words. And maybe, Ken, at our Bible study, you can figure this out in the fall. The gospel says this today. Do not think that I have come to bring peace. Well, I just talked about peace just a minute ago. Do not think that I've come to bring peace. I have come not to bring peace, but to bring a sword. I have come to set men against their fathers, daughters against their mothers, daughter-in-laws against their mother-in-laws, because one's enemies are inside your own home. Figure that out. Those aren't Jesus' words. That's not the gospel we've been preaching for year after year after year. Because studying the Bible, as you well know, takes courage. Studying the Bible takes time. You got to dig deep into what's happening and figure out why those words are there. Oh, sure, sometimes fathers and sons do fight. I know that and you know that. Sometimes daughters and fathers and daughters and moms, they fight. Sometimes religion becomes divisive in your own family. And sometimes there's enemies even in your own house. We all know that. But Jesus was a Savior and a Son of God of peace and healing and goodness. A young man is imprisoned. People and nations are at war. And the only way it's ever going to get better is if we take that message of Jesus that brings people together. And it's got to start inside the heart and the soul and the fiber of each and every one of us, because that's the only place I can control it. I was at a wedding reception yesterday, not as the minister, but just as a guy. And I was sitting at a table with a bunch of people that I didn't really know all that well. And so I'm talking to the person next to me, and his name is Tony. And I said, you should come to our church, because everybody's named Tony or Joe in our church. If you say Tony or Joe, half the people turn around. And he looks at me and says, I understand, Reverend, that you had a very busy day today. And I did. I had a funeral in the morning and 2 weddings, and then I went to the reception. And I laugh a bit, and I said, well, it's about time I put in a full day anyway. You know, it's about time. And then he said, how do you do that? A wedding and a funeral, how do you switch gears like that? And I said, it's my job. It's my calling. To make things as okay and as good as possible for people wherever they are. That's what I do. And I said, well, how about your calling? And he said, well, I don't really have a calling. I'm a heavy equipment operator. That's not a calling. And I said, wait a minute. Yes, it is. I said, let's say, Tony, you had a tough night. You had to go to the ER with somebody in your family. But then you got to be on the job at 5 o'clock in the morning to build one of those skyscrapers with your heavy equipment in the loop. Do people care what you did the night before? No. Because at 5 o'clock in the morning, you have to do your job to keep us safe. You cannot mess up. That's your calling. And then he starts sharing with me that he's in a 12-step program and how things were awful years ago. And somehow, some way, he had the courage to step back and do something about it. And he said, but you know something, Reverend? If it wasn't for what I did 10 or 12 years ago, I wouldn't be talking to you today. I wouldn't be sitting here next to my wife. He said, it is what it is. And I said, you must be Lutheran. Well, that's the way we talk. And he said, no, I'm not. Funny, years ago, I lived in a house on a slab. And my son Jeremy was 4. And we had a leak because the water went into the slab and came back out again. And the leak's under the slab. So I called a plumber. And my 4-year-old son is sitting on the washing machine watching this plumber work. And Jeremy said, Dad, I want to be a plumber when I grow up. And I watched the plumber. He felt the concrete, and he listened, and he just had the patience, and he actually found the place and started cracking the concrete. And then he looked at me and said, by the way, Reverend, when did you get your calling to be a minister? And I said, I think at the same time you got your calling to be a plumber, because you found the leak. And right now, you are the most important person in my life. And I'm glad you're here. You see, in life, each one of us has a calling. Each one of us, as humble as we may be, has a purpose. Each one of us makes a difference. Each one of us is a child of God. And I think of that song, let there be peace on earth, but it's got to begin with me and you. Amen. If you're able to, please rise for the creed. It's on page 105.